Well, it's a great day for Canada, everyone. Germany just signed a long-term LNG deal with us. We're talking 1 million tons of LNG per year for up to 2 decades. And honestly, what sort of makes me laugh is that a good chunk of why that happened is Donald Trump. Accidentally, but still.
Regardless, Trump may have just done more for Canada's energy future than a dozen government trade missions combined.
Yeah, and today we want to walk through exactly what happened here, because the details of this deal, like who signed it, why they signed it now, and what it actually means for Canada, is pretty significant. And we should not be quiet about it. We should be out there yelling this from the rooftops.
So let's start with why this even feels surprising in the first place. Because for years, there was a very consistent argument against Canadian LNG going to Europe. If you were in the industry, you heard it constantly. It was the same 4 things every time.
Yep. Too far, too complicated, too late, and too expensive. American Gulf Coast terminals were already built. Qatar was pumping enormous volumes. Why would any European buyer deal with the complexity of routing a whole supply chain all the way to northern British Columbia?
And truthfully, when the world was relatively predictable, that argument held up. Canada sent its energy south. We had one customer. It worked very well until it didn't.
And that arrangement was actually really convenient for Washington as well. Having Canada as essentially a captive supplier gave the Americans an underlying leverage, and they knew it. Canada pushes back on something, well, you need to keep us buying your stuff, so too bad on that one.
That leverage was real, and it worked for a long time because Canada didn't push back. Until recently, that is. And now Germany is at the table. So let's talk about what actually happened.
Germany's state-owned energy company, Sefe, has signed an agreement to purchase 1 million tons of Canadian LNG every single year from the Ksi Lisims project in northern British Columbia for up to 20 years.
To be fair, it still needs its final investment decision, so this isn't gas flowing next winter. But here's what this really means. A 20-year purchase agreement from the state-owned energy company of one of the biggest industrial economies on the planet. That's what turns a project from a proposal into something real. You cannot build a major LNG terminal on optimism alone, so investors need to know that there's a buyer. Germany just made that happen. They said, we're the buyer and we're in.
And the other thing about this project that is pretty different from how Canada used to do resource development is that it's a partnership with the Nisga'a Nation. Actual equity in the project. This is not the usual consultation process or photo op at a signing table. This is ownership.
And it's about time. For Germany and Canada, this really means something. German companies buying LNG from a project where Indigenous peoples have genuine equity built into the foundation, well, that's a completely different story to tell their own public back home. They're not funding a pipeline controversy. They're investing in a Canadian Indigenous-led energy project.
And in Germany's current political environment, with coalition partners watching every single major resource decision closely, that framing, it really matters more than people outside Germany even realize right now.
But let's be honest about the real driver here, because Germany didn't just randomly decide Canada seemed like a good idea. Germany learned 2 very expensive lessons in the last few years. First, of course, is Russia.
Yep. Europe built its entire energy future on Russian gas. Then Russia invaded Ukraine, and suddenly European governments realized that they'd given enormous political leverage to a supplier who was perfectly willing to weaponize it. So after Ukraine, a lot of that Russian gas got replaced with American LNG, which sure, it helped in the short term, but it also just created a new version of the same problem, right?
Yeah, you moved from one dominant supplier to a different dominant supplier. And Trump has shown that he'll use economic relationships as pressure tools in ways that make their own allies very uneasy. Canada's been living in that reality for 18 months. Europe, they've been watching it happen.
And then there's the Iran situation. When the US launched those strikes, one of the things energy markets noticed right away was Qatar. one of the biggest LNG exporters on Earth, is in a really tough spot, literally and figuratively right now. The instability that has come with the Iran war has directly rippled into European supply chains, so all of Europe is feeling the pinch at this point. This is the reality right now, and it doesn't look like things are going to be changing anytime soon.
So Germany looks at its main energy options, which are Russia, the Americans, Qatar, and all three have become complicated for different but equally serious reasons. And someone in Berlin said, hey, what about Canada?
Right here.
Eh?
And Natural Resources Minister Tim Hodgson was over there making exactly that pitch. The words he used were really, really deliberate. Reliable, stable, democratic, trustworthy. That's the offer Canada is making. Not the cheapest, not the closest, but most reliable. And as we all know in 2026, reliable has a premium on it.
And here's the part that we keep coming back to. It's all about Trump's own decisions. The Iran strikes, the treatment of allies, the unpredictability on trade that accelerated a diversification conversation that might have taken at least another decade. You know, European energy buyers were already thinking about this, but he just made them move a lot faster.
The country he keeps threatening and treating like garbage just got handed a 20-year contract, partly because of how he's been behaving. And that's saying something.
For decades, Canada sent its energy almost entirely south. We had one customer, and when that customer was stable, the arrangement held and was beneficial to both sides.
But it also meant that we had almost no leverage. We want to push back hard on tariffs, or we want to negotiate seriously on trade terms. Well, hey, look it, they buy almost everything we produce, so we better be careful.
If Canada has European buyers, Asian buyers, multiple destinations for its energy, well, then Washington loses some of that quiet leverage that it's been sitting on for a long time. And that has gotta hurt.
Yeah. Now, Mark Carney's been pretty explicit that this is his strategy. Reduce dependence on the American market, deepen ties with Europe and Asia, and use Canada's resources as a geopolitical asset, not just an export commodity. And BC's geography plays right into this. The LNG terminal is actually closer to Asian markets than any Gulf Coast terminal in the US. Canadian LNG flowing to Asia with supply swaps allowing European deliveries from other sources? Well, that's awesome. Listen, Canada is becoming part of the global energy system in a way that builds options for us.
More buyers means more investment. More jobs means more tax revenue and more negotiating room in Washington. Hey, those things don't exist in a vacuum.
No, energy and trade and security, they're all connected. When Germany signs a 20-year purchase agreement with Canada, it's not just a business transaction. It's a choice about who they trust, who they want in their corner long term. And Canada, being in that calculation, genuinely not just as that little backup option, that is new.
So let's say what this actually means, Dave, because Canada spent years being underestimated as an energy supplier. We were too far away, too slow, too comfortable depending on the USA. But this deal is a signal that perception is changing all around the world.
Germany included Canada in its energy security future, a 20-year purchase agreement from a state-owned company. That is a big deal and hopefully the start of many more to come.
So we want to hear from you today and give us your honest opinion. Do you think Canada actually gets this LNG built and delivery within the timeline that Europe needs?
Because signing a 20-year deal is one thing, but following through on a major energy infrastructure is where Canada has a complicated track record.
If this landed differently than what you've been watching on TV lately, give it a like and share it with someone who needs the real picture on what's shifting here. And if you can, give it a hike because every hike counts and helps us reach more people.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.